Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Stagg with Wisconsin Facets, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. We are continuing our Compassion Resilience Self-Care Snapshot series with today's webinar on self-compassion. Our presenter today is Emily Jonesberg. She is the training lead with Rogers in Health, the Education and Advocacy Department of Rogers Behavioral Health, and a proud mom of an active toddler. In her role at Rogers, she facilitates trainings for leaders in the nonprofit, education, and healthcare sectors. Emily also facilitates programming for staff at Rogers Behavioral Health and with parents in the community. Prior to her work at Rogers, Emily worked in youth servicing capacity for over 13 years through various nonprofits and school districts. During this time, she also developed and delivered equity training with adults and youth. Emily has a Master of Social Work and is a licensed clinical social worker. And with that, we'll start our training. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks, Chris, and good to be with you all. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be able to be part of this series. You may, if you've logged on to one of the previous ones, a colleague of mine, Dr. Sarah Reed, led the first two, and I have the privilege to be able to lead some of the next upcoming ones. So thanks for having me here. And as mentioned, our focus for today around compassion resilience is that of self-compassion, which I'll get into here in a moment, and has been a huge part of not just my professional work as a social worker, but also my mom of that active toddler that was mentioned in the opening there. Before I jump into content, I think it's helpful, given the hecticness of our lives, just to take a moment to pause and practice a little bit of mindfulness. This will also be a practice I'll pull on as I talk about self-compassion later on in our time together today. But if you wouldn't mind getting into a comfortable position, whatever that means for you, and I'd encourage you to take your eyes off the screen, close them even if you're comfortable doing so. If you're seated, I'm going to ask that you in that comfortable position, perhaps it's your feet are touching the ground, and just let them relax. Let your arms and hands relax. And I want you to bring your attention to your breath. Just take note of where your breath is. Is it moving fast? Is it relaxed? And take a moment just to calm it down if you need to. Let your breath relax and slow. And as you focus on that slow breath, I want you to bring your attention to the rest of your body. For me, I'm seated with my feet on the ground, so I feel my body's weight sitting on the chair. Bringing your attention to the weight you may feel in your feet as they touch the ground. Bring your attention to any sounds you may hear, or even any smells you may notice. Do your best just to be here in the moment with your breath. We'll just focus on our breath for 2 more slow breaths. And I invite you to bring your attention back to this screen, to our time together. And thank you for participating in that with me. So you notice we took a couple minutes to do that, and you could do any variation in your day from a longer period, 30 minutes, an hour, to even just a moment to just check in and take 1 slow breath. There's a lot of research that shows our ability to check in with ourselves and give ourselves a moment to pause, even if it's short, can have a really positive impact on our ability to build and maintain our compassion resilience, and as we'll talk about today, our self-compassion. The material that I'm going to be pulling from today and throughout this series comes from our Compassion Resilience Toolkit. You can find it at compassionresilienceToolkit.org. It is a free resource for anyone in the community to access. After you click on the third link, you will be asked to create an account, but it's merely just so that we can keep track of the breadth, the reach of the toolkit, and occasionally send an email when we make big changes or updates to the toolkit. The idea behind it is that there are 2 toolkits to support professionals in a school or health and human service capacity, and then there's also one specifically for parent and caregivers, all about how do we build and maintain this culture of compassion resilience, supporting ourselves and those around us, whether at work or in our personal lives. If you haven't checked this out, I highly encourage you to do so. In addition to a number of the resources in the toolkit, there's also a couple of COVID-related specific resources that are linked at the top of the homepage that have some videos and some articles that get you just to think about some of the core concepts as they connect back to our current times. So I've mentioned compassion resilience already a couple of times, and I'm going to ground us in our working definition that we'll use each time we're in these series together. And the first one is just the power to return to a position of empathy, strength, and hope. And I truly believe that this position of empathy, strength, and hope is that of the baseline of us as humans. We come from a place of empathy, strength, and hope, but we get away from it sometimes when we are exposed or continually witness the challenges that we experience in the community or that our loved ones experience or those that we serve and work with experience. And repeated exposure to those challenges can move us away from that baseline. But when we're able to build up our skills around compassion resilience, we're able to return to that baseline quicker and quicker each time. And we're able, as the second part of this definition implies, able to be optimistic in our oh so imperfect world. I know each one of us could think of probably a handful plus of reasons why our world isn't quite perfect. And yet, the importance of us staying positive and optimistic and realistic in those moments can help us build and maintain a definition around compassion resilience. In your first, I believe it was the first session with Sarah back in January, she talked a little bit about compassion fatigue. And I want to bring that back up to connect the concept we're going to be talking about today to that of compassion fatigue. As you see here, this is a cycle and it's pulled from Dr. Eric Gentry's work. And it's an experience that all of us go through as humans. Oftentimes, several times we'll go through this, maybe even several times throughout a day. The first part of this is that of that zealot mode. This is when perhaps we're new to a role or to a responsibility. I even experienced this at the beginning of COVID back in March of 2020, when now my daughter was home with me full time and trying to balance work and caring for her and trying to be everything to everyone. I was in a little bit of a zealot mode. It's the beginning of the cycle because it's unrealistic, the number of things that we put on our plate at this time. If we're not able to make sure we're setting those realistic expectations and setting boundaries, we may move into the next part of the cycle, which is that of irritability, or what you'll see here is that grumpy cat. This is when you may get particularly frustrated or kind of prickly with those around you. And when you're not able to get out of the sense of what's starting to feel like increased sadness and helplessness, you may move into the withdrawal phase, which is pretty withdrawn from those around you. You may feel examples of fatigue, both physically and mentally, and you're having a hard time connecting with those that you care about, whether it's in your personal life or those that you work with in your professional life. If you continue on the cycle, it may come to the place of the zombie or the zombie cat mode, as you see here. This is when it's very much about survival, one step in front of the other, and you're doing your best just to get by. You may seem that you can never do enough, and yet at the same time have an inflated sense of purpose. So something like, I am the only one who could do this task, take care of this committee, or even care for this loved one. I'm the only one that can connect with them and make sure that they are well cared for and their needs are met. You're very much removed from any other support that you may need along the way. And if we stay in this cycle, we may burn ourselves out, whether it's in our personal life with those, our loved ones, end up feeling very much removed and not supported and having a hard time showing empathy to them. Or we may feel completely burned out of that role that we're doing professionally and may leave the profession altogether. So we're talking about things throughout this series, including today, that are really addressing this cycle of compassion fatigue. And at the base of this, one thing that is so crucial to all the other things that we'll be talking about is that of self-compassion, the way in which we talk to ourselves and treat ourselves. It's so important. In order for us to be able to treat others with compassion, we have to start with ourselves first. We pull from the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who talks a lot about self-compassion and has done a lot of research in this area. And Dr. Neff talks about when you make a mistake or you fall short of an expectation you set for yourself or one that someone else set for you, or really you're experiencing any sort of suffering, how do you respond to yourself? How do you talk to yourself? And the first part of this is that of self-kindness. Do you go to a place where you say to yourself, maybe, I made a mistake, it happens, no big deal, I'm going to move on? Or do you go to a place where you're overcritical? Tell yourself, I'm the only one that could do this. I can't believe you messed up. A lot of negative self-talk and negative self-thoughts. The second part is, do you go to a place of common humanity? Do you see that you're human? And so, of course, you made a mistake. All humans make mistakes. That's what we do. So naturally, you're going to make them too, or naturally, you're going to experience some sort of pain or suffering because that's part of being human. Or do you go to the place of feeling like you're the only one who could possibly make this mistake? You're alone in this, and it further fuels those negative self-thoughts. And then the final component is when those negative self-thoughts or strong, difficult, overwhelming emotions arise, are you mindful of them? Do you see them? Maybe even give them a little wave and then let them pass? Or do you cling to them, over-identify with them, have them become part of who you are? And the more that we are able to practice this level of self-kindness, see ourselves as part of common humanity, and practice the sense of mindfulness, the more that we're able to practice self-compassion. A crucial part to us being able to carry on in a joyful way around the world around us, to overcome challenges as they arise, and then also to show that compassion and care for other people. Naturally, we have to start with ourselves. We often say when we talk about self-compassion that no one talks to ourselves more than we do. And so why can we not talk to ourselves in that kind way that we would to a good friend or a loved one? And what kind of impact could it have if we did? Now, I don't mean to say that this is necessarily a very easy thing to do. When you think about self-compassion, oftentimes it connects to another wellness practice we talk about in compassion resilience, which is that of resist, persist, and acceptance. So this is around things that come up for us. When we resist them, oftentimes they persist. A classic example is sleeplessness. Let's say at night you have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep. If you focus on that you have a hard time sleeping, as you're laying there in bed trying to fall asleep, oftentimes it becomes harder and harder to actually fall asleep. So there's this level of acceptance that comes along with it. This is how I am. I'm having a hard time sleeping. I'm going to accept that and let my body just even rest. Even if it's not asleep, it'll be relaxed. That connects to this idea of self-compassion as well. As those negative thoughts and feelings arise, if we resist them, we bury them, we distract ourselves with other things around us, those feelings aren't going to go away, unfortunately. They're going to persist and they're going to bubble up in other ways. So that's why this practice of mindfulness comes into play around self-compassion. When we're able to pause and let ourselves accept that we're experiencing something challenging, that we've made a mistake that we're upset about, and we let ourselves sit with that feeling for a moment and accept it, we can give it a chance to honor it and let it pass, as we talked about with that second piece. Do our best to let it go. And as we're waiting for it to go, we're going to be embracing ourselves with the support that we'd be looking for, that really we'd be asking someone else to provide to us, or that we would be willing to provide to a good friend or family member who is hurting. We're going to provide ourselves that support. And remember that those imperfections that we're experiencing, that we have in us, those are part of being human. So naturally, they're going to be there. The more that we're able to give ourselves this care and love in the moment, the more we're able to move past and experience some level of growth and development of resilience when it comes to challenging times. But this sitting in the moment, it can make it feel like, my goodness, I'm practicing self-compassion and I'm having an increase of challenging times. I'm having more pain right now than I would have had in the past, because this is a new practice for you. And sitting with that doesn't feel good, particularly in the beginning phases of it. As you give yourself a chance to practice it, remember to be patient along the way and know that this is going to take time to develop and work on as you take a moment to accept yourself as who you fully are. Like our quote says here, it truly starts and ends with having compassion for all those unwanted parts of ourselves and all those imperfections that we don't even want to look at. Those are who we are at our full selves. And taking time to pause and see them and accept them gives us a chance to care for ourselves and move forward. One of the reasons I started with the practice in the beginning was because when those feelings may feel overwhelming or so intense that they take us out of this place of being able to be compassionate to ourselves, giving ourselves to recenter and bring ourselves back into our physical body can be helpful. Giving us a chance to check in with our breath, or for some, it's even getting a warm beverage or being with a pet. Giving ourselves a moment to be with ourselves, to care for ourselves, is going to be important for being able to embrace that and practice this level of self-compassion. It's truly planting seeds for future work that we're able to do with ourselves as we go through these challenging times. If you're interested in seeing where you may be in regards to self-compassion at this point, on Dr. Kristen Neff's website, and the link there on the slide, gives you a chance to do a self-assessment, which really is a read of where you are right now in regards to self-compassion. If you choose to take this assessment, and it's anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes in length, I highly encourage that you use it with a lens just to see which things are working well now and where do I have some opportunity for growth. The last thing we want folks to do when they look at a self-assessment around self-compassion is use it as another opportunity to beat ourselves up. Not necessary. So indeed, prepare yourself as you go into it, as I'm going to take this as a chance to look at things I can grow in to further support myself and how I treat myself. I have some self-reflection questions that I'd like to leave you with here as part of my presentation to really think about and tell you a little bit about how these have made an impact for me when I think about self-compassion. The first one is if you practiced more self-compassion, what would be different in your life? Do you think you may experience a different level of joy? Do you think you may feel a different level of calmness, or even a different level of authenticity? And my second one, how does your level of self-compassion impact your ability to be compassionate to others? When I first started doing compassion resilience work, I was coming out of doing social work in a middle school space before joining Rogers Behavioral Health. And though I knew about self-compassion, and I had been told as a social worker many times over, you have to be kind to yourself in order to be kind to others, I didn't have as much buy-in around it. It felt kind of fluffy. And then I started to think about, well, what would be different if I practiced more self-compassion in my life? What kind of impact would it have? And it took me to a place to think about, how do I behave and respond when I'm not being compassionate to myself? I can tell you, when I'm taking those moments when I've made a mistake or I'm experiencing suffering and I'm really hard on myself, I'm beating myself up, can't believe you did that, can't believe you didn't meet that expectation. I have been told I'm oftentimes feel kind of prickly to those around me, to the very people that I am trying to support and care for as a social worker. I become kind of hard to be around. I also have a really hard time being available for other people and the pain they may be experiencing, and being able to support them in the way that I truly would like to support them. I came to realize, if I'm able to be kinder to myself in those moments, not only do I feel better, but I'm able to move on from the mistake quicker, and I'm able to better support those around me. So not only does it have a feel good for me, but it has a great outcome for those that I'm supporting along the way too. Those are some of the things that helped me realize that this could be a practice that I should incorporate more often. And it is a great analogy on that comic on the bottom there. It really helps as we practice self-compassion. We start to experience and be aware of all the great things around us, including the good things that we're doing, more often than when we are self-critical and we're so focused on those one or two few things that aren't going well. So I encourage you to take time to think about what this would mean for you and how you can incorporate it on a regular basis. I want to leave us today with one more practice. It's called a self-compassion break, and it's going to incorporate those main components we talked about that are involved in self-compassion. So again, I'm going to ask you to get into a comfortable position. As you do, I want you to bring to mind a situation in your life that's difficult, challenging, may bring up some really strong, difficult emotions. I'm going to ask you to bring those emotions up in you. Let yourself sit with them for just a moment here. Perhaps even feel it in your body. And now, as you do, I'm going to have you say a couple things to yourself in your head. The first, this is a moment of suffering. I am taking a moment to be aware of the suffering I'm experiencing, and it hurts. It is stress. Now I want you to tell yourself a second thing. Suffering is part of life. Other people feel suffering. I'm not alone in it. We all struggle in our lives. As you focus on that common humanity, I also want you to bring your hands over your heart if you're comfortable, and just let yourself feel that weight and warmth. It's a symbol of comfort that you're giving yourself, the support you're giving yourself. Keep them there as you tell yourself this last piece. May I be kind to myself. Ask yourself, what do you need to hear right now to express kindness to yourself? Perhaps it's, may I forgive myself? May I be patient? May I give myself the compassion I need? As you lower your hands, let yourself sit with that for a moment and know that that self-compassion break is something you can do at any time, day or night, out in public or not. Tell yourselves those three things: that this hurts, it is suffering, suffering is part of life, and I am here to be kind to myself and support myself during this difficult time. It's a reminder of what my last slide here has. We all can be good to ourselves so that truly we can be good to others. I want to thank you for your time and attention during our short self-care break here, and we get a chance to talk about self-compassion. I'll pause and see if we have any questions.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, some people might look at self-compassion and letting go as you don't care. How do you address that with someone else?
Thank you for that question. And I feel like it's a great example of quite the opposite. You care so much that you are doing your best to care for yourself so that you can respond in a way that is best for yourself and those around you. As I mentioned earlier, when we get consumed and we beat ourselves up, we're really bringing ourselves into a place where we're not nearly as effective or compassionate. So when we're able to build, not necessarily even build ourselves, but care for ourselves in the moment, we're able to be our best selves for ourselves and for those around us. And this isn't meant to be, lacking of any sort of accountability. We do make mistakes and we need to take ownership of mistakes that we make, but we don't need to continue to live with and beat ourselves up with those mistakes. It doesn't help anyone, ourselves or those that are around us. So that's something I would remind somebody else if they had said, hey, Emily, you went to self-compassionate place, but you made such a big mistake. I agree. I recognize something I'm going to learn and grow and try not to do again, but I don't need to continue to beat myself up over it. It doesn't help me or anyone else.
Great, thank you. I also have another question. How can we start with little things to grow our self-compassion? Are there more ideas in the toolkit, like exercises or activities?
Yeah, thank you for that. There are a couple, in section 2 and section 11 of the School and Health and Human Services Toolkit in particular, touch on self-compassion, even includes the self-compassion break that I led for you. And then, of course, Dr. Kristen Neff's site, which is at the bottom of the slide, selfcompassion.org, has a ton of practices that you can use and work through to develop your own self-compassion. I'd even say something that we talk about when we talk about starting small and need reminders is having some sort of visual cue to ourselves as a reminder to be kind. So one of those, I may have even seen me during this, I wear a bracelet on my left arm. That serves as a reminder to me of the self-compassion, being kind. So when I'm in a challenging place, I can even just touch that as a reminder of, yes, that's right. I need to be kind to myself. I can get through this. I will learn and grow from this. So even having a rock in your pocket, a bracelet, a picture nearby, a quote, something like that can help remind you to incorporate that practice into your life more often.
That is great. I am going to get myself a bracelet.
It's been helpful for me.
And then I just do have one more question. Somebody is asking, how do you know when to seek professional help?
Great question. Awesome. Yeah, and I'm a bit biased as somebody who has a clinical background, a licensed clinical social worker. I always think that people can use extra persons to talk to. So I'm a full supporter of seeking out professional help, even if it's just a process, an upcoming big decision. But certainly if you're in a place where you feel like these negative thoughts and emotions become something that you cannot help but ruminate on, that really start to take over your thoughts and your actions, and you have a hard time bringing yourself back into yourself, like I mentioned with the mindfulness practice, or bringing yourself the self-compassion that you deserve, even after you've done this a little while and you're still having a really hard time and those become overwhelming, I'd highly, highly encourage you to reach out for support and reach out to a professional to talk through these and get some extra help to go in that time of need.
Great, thank you. That is all the questions that I have. I want to say thank you to Emily for presenting to us today on this truly valuable topic. I want to remind everyone that this is a series of webinars that will run monthly through August, and you can register for them on the Wisconsin PASS website. Thanks to you all for attending this training. The recording and a survey will be sent to you shortly, and we would, of course, greatly appreciate your completion of the survey. that is it for today, and I thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all. Take care.